Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of
Code Surreal.
How are you, Serene?
I'm good, thank you.
How was your day?
I was busy,
Oh,
So I
wow.
went to visit a friend today.
Who is she?
This is a friend who's an F2 in the UK, actually.
Nice. Has she finished her F2?
She's just about to, and this is what we were talking about today, actually.
I know, yeah. I think we've slightly touched this in the last episode when we wrapped it up, that we're going to speak about what happens after an FY2.
Yeah, so I think we should talk about that today.
Yep, I'm all ears.
So, my friend's actually a bit anxious about this at the moment.
Tell me more.
So, I don't know if you've heard, but last year,
Okay.
52% of F2 doctors who finish their foundation training can't find a job.
52?
52%.
I did hear like a lot of people are struggling to find a job. I've never expected 52.
To be that high. I don't think
high.
anyone did. So this is quite topical at the moment. And I think that, competition's being driven up. In another episode, we definitely need to talk about maybe things you can do if you can't find a job at all.
Yeah, that would be reasonable.
But today, let's talk about
what to do after an F2.
Yeah, things you can do after your F2.
So for international doctors like myself as well, we didn't do FY2. We've all came to the UK, possibly fully registered, looking for either a training post or a non-training post, which is a service job. Is there anything else to do?
Well, coming to the UK from abroad, you may not want to go into training straight away.
Okay,
and certainly it's not easy, is it?
It's not easy, no.
So as we've discussed in previous episodes, to get into training, it requires all sorts of points, as we talked about.
Very hard.
And, we talked about your journey, about getting these points. And it's taken you years, hasn't it?
It's taken me years. This is my second year in NHS. I still don't have a training post.
Bless you. But you're trying.
I'm trying.
Good luck for this year.
Never give up.
No, we're not putting the
Never
evil
give
eye
up.
on this.
Yeah.
So you need to do things like audits. You need to do things
Tons of
like try and get research and show interest in specialty. So you might want to maybe do something else before you get a training job. So let's talk about what else you can do. So you're not in training right now, are you, Al? Why don't you tell everyone what you're doing?
I'm doing a service job, which is a non-training post. For people coming from abroad, when you come to UK from abroad, you're possibly at the same level as someone who just finished their FY2s. So you're both in that stage of trying to find a job. For me, it wasn't easy scoring the job. Honestly, I went into clinical attachment. Luckily, I had the GMC registration when I did the clinical attachment. So even though I was not being paid, but I was being treated as if I was a junior doctor, GCF, which is what I'm doing at the moment. I used to do ward round, I used to do plans, I used to do all the investigation, I used to discuss MDT, everything, honestly. I think that's when they gave me that responsibility and they felt that I can take it. They trusted me with it and offered me a job.
Okay, so you worked your way into that job.
Worked so hard.
Excellent. So I've actually also done one of those jobs.
Really? Tell me more.
So
I know that now you're an IMT.
Now I'm a trainee.
One of the
Took
best.
time to get. Oh, stop it! Took time to get there, but I've also done a service provision job. So these days, these are called JCF jobs, or Junior Clinical Fellow. Yeah. And for those who have more experience in the NHS and you're working at a registrar level rather than an SHO level, at that point you're called an SCF, or a Senior Clinical Fellow.
Right.
So, what specialty is your JCF job in?
I'm lucky with my job. It's rotational.
Okay.
So every 6 months, I go in a different department.
So medicine. Hospital medicine.
Or acute medicine. Because I've done stroke.
Okay.
I've done emergency assessment unit, which is acute internal medicine. I've done respiratory. So it's a little bit of all.
Okay, so Al's basically working as a medical JCF at the moment. And that's what my job as well was.
You also rotated?
JCF. I did. I was a rotational medical JCF.
Nice. Tell me more, please.
Well, I learnt a lot. Do I feel as if the way I was treated as a trainee and the way I was treated as a rotational fellow were different? Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah, definitely.
In which sense?
So there's definitely pros and cons to being a trainee versus, having a service provision job. I do feel as if now being a trainee, I have a lot more sort of dedicated time to do things like teaching and to go to clinic and to sort of work on other educational bits on the side. Whereas I did feel that when I had a service provision job, as you probably feel right now, I had to work a lot harder to get those extra things done. That was probably the main day-to-day difference in it.
So that's one thing that people can do when they
Yeah.
come abroad or when they finish FY2, which is
Absolutely.
applying for a non-training post.
Yeah.
How do they apply?
So there's lots of different ways to do this.
Okay.
Now I think the way that probably most people know about, because that's what comes up first when you Google it,
Track.
is to go on Track or
Track.
NHS jobs.
I found it on Track.
You found your job on Track.
Yeah.
Now the other way is just kind of by knowing that a job is being advertised
Okay.
and getting in touch sort of on a more local level than that.
Okay.
For that you kind of need to be here or have some contacts, and it's difficult if you're coming from
Very
abroad
difficult,
to do that. So largely people make an NHS jobs account, go on Track and find the jobs
And
that
find
way.
the job you need. Yeah, that's what I've done,
Absolutely.
guys. All right, that's one thing covered. Are there any other options?
Yeah, so I actually did quite a few bits
Wow.
after. So do you remember in our first episode?
Oh yeah, you did mention you've done a
Yeah,
lot.
so I've had 3 years.
This episode's
between-
all about you then.
Oh, I love it. Not all about me, which we will get to, but between the end of my F2 and starting training, I had 3 years, and each of those years I did something different. So
Okay, tell me
one
more.
of those years I was a rotational fellow, like
Okay.
yourself, and one of those years I had a really cool job. I was a clinical teaching fellow, and some may know that as educational fellow.
I'm aware of that. It's the one that you just basically, you work 1 or twice a week on ward, but otherwise you only teach.
Every job plan's a little bit different. It
Okay.
involves teaching.
Okay.
And it involves teaching medical students, and
Okay.
that is largely your job description. Now, some of these jobs involve only teaching full time. You could be based on the university campus, you could be based in the hospital.
Okay.
My job was a really nice mix of both of them. So I taught the geriatrics, or as it's now more, I suppose, formally called care of the elderly,
All right.
block to 4th year medical students.
Okay.
And I was teaching about 3 days of the week, and I was clinical about 2 days of the week. But there was a lot of overlap between those two things, because it all sort of happened in the same department. And yeah, there were no on-calls. It was a lovely 9 to 5 job. It did involve a lot of preparation outside of work,
No.
for the teaching component.
Of course, because I mean, you have to prepare the subject you're going to teach.
Absolutely.
You have to be
you
on
know.
on top of it, because you do not know what question you might be asked by the med students.
Well, it's good to do some background reading
Yeah.
on it. Absolutely.
You know, one time I read something, the best way to learn is to teach.
That's so true. And I definitely learned so much
So
about
much out of
care of the elderly and complex medicine that year.
Question, how did you apply for this job?
So this is an example of sort of having been in the same hospital and found the job locally. Having said that, the job did also go out on Track.
Really?
So the job was on Track. However, it was also advertised locally, and that's how, within the same trust that I was working at as a rotational fellow at the time, and that's how I came to find out about it.
You know, I don't think this job would be favorable for people from abroad.
Why not?
I reckon when you want to hire someone to teach med students, you want someone who with a lot of knowledge in NHS. International graduate, they don't really know NHS system, they don't know how the job's done. So yes, I can teach med student medicine, but they also need to know how to get the job done, which I cannot physically do if I don't have experience in NHS.
You raise a good point. Possibly NHS experience is definitely one of the things that, employers might look at when they're hiring people for this job.
If we covered the non-training,
Right.
and then we did a little bit of the educational part,
Okay.
what other job have you done?
So, my 3rd year, and this may be something that might not necessarily be that accessible
Okay.
to people who've come from abroad as international graduates. My 3rd year, I locumed.
Oh yeah, that's...
So, what's the difference between locuming and working in a service provision job?
Locuming, I reckon you're just waiting for shifts to pop up and you take them.
So they can be. So there are short-term locums and long-term locums.
Okay.
And I've done a mix of both of those. Now, can you tell us why this might be a problem for people coming abroad, and especially those on a visa?
Because you need to be sponsored.
Absolutely.
Locum, you don't get sponsored, do you?
No, you don't. So it's a bit difficult for people coming from abroad to pick up ad hoc shifts like that. So what might be the best bet for a doctor coming from abroad?
Non-training.
A non-training.
A service, pretty much what I'm doing.
A service provision post, absolutely.
Feel free to write in the comment if you have any question about how I got my job or extra points I've done. I'll reply to all of that.
You know, something that's becoming increasingly popular nowadays, especially amongst, people who finish their F2 here, that's going abroad, and that's doing a year
In Australia.
in Australia.
I've heard so many
in
people.
New Zealand.
New Zealand?
Yeah, so you know, a lot of people tend to go to these places and have jobs largely in the acute care specialties, basically, and spend a few years out there, you know, have some experience.
Wow. I've heard about Australia quite a lot. I've never heard about New Zealand.
Yeah, so people go to both, I believe.
I reckon now would be a good time to tell our viewers.
Yeah, so
We have a
little treat
surprise for you
today.
Yeah.
We actually have a guest star. It's
We
someone who's done this job and can tell us all about what it's like
In
working
Australia.
out in Australia.
Yep.
Let's bring him on.
Let's bring him up. Guys, please give a round of applause for our guest, Dr.
Kush.
Hello.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
so
me.
much for joining us.
No
Honestly,
problem.
it's an honor for us to have you with us.
Yeah, so Al, this is one of my dear friends
Okay.
who I met whilst I was working on Orthogerries.
Nice.
And yes, he has quite an exciting story.
Tell us more. Let's start by how did you apply? How do you go to Australia? What's the pathway?
Sure. Okay. So I went to Australia in one of my years out of training, and it actually kind of happened by chance. So I was doing a year of. So this was my F3 year, so post F2. So this is actually when I worked with Serene.
Okay.
So I worked for a couple of months, and then I went traveling. So I
Okay.
went traveling, and I visited Australia because I had some friends who had already been to Australia. As you guys mentioned, is quite a common thing for a lot of UK doctors to go to. And then, you know, I was traveling around the country, having a really good time, met with one of my friends, and he said, do you want a job here? And I said, what do you mean? And he was like, you know, if you want a job in Australia, like, they're hiring. I was like, oh, what's the application process? How does this work? He said, you can just email this person, see what happens.
Simple as that.
Simple as
Drop
that.
an email.
So-
Drop an email.
And I sent an email to basically the head of the recruitment at the hospital that my friend was working at, and thought nothing of it, obviously. And then I think I was still traveling for a couple of weeks later. I just landed back in the UK, and then I get an email saying your interview's next week. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess that
Just
worked.
like that. Yeah,
I
no
guess that
wonder
worked,
so
yeah.
many people do it.
Honestly,
Gosh.
I know so many people that left for Australia. Surprises me. For me, it's not a valid option. It's not even an option because I'm done with relocating.
Of course, yeah.
But for the viewers who are out there, whether they just finished their FY2s and they're thinking about it, what would you tell them? Honestly, like a piece of advice: do it, don't do it, good, working hours, money wise, all of this.
So I think it really depends what you want out of these years post F2. So I think most viewers, obviously the people who practice in the UK, if they do F1, F2, most people normally complete their foundation years before looking for other adventures, or where they want to go to training, or whether they want something a little bit different. I think the reason why Australia is very popular, especially for a lot of UK grads, is because their system is very similar to ours.
Okay.
So it's quite easy to go across and settle in very quickly, if that makes sense. So as I mentioned, they recognise UK medical schools as a very similar kind of standard to Australian practicing. And when you go across, say you're at post F2 level, so SHO level, you'll be working as like an RMO, so resident medical officer. So you'll be working at pretty much the same grade. So there's not too much change in your responsibilities when you go. You'll be doing ward rounds with registrars and consultants. You'll be doing kind of the same things that you'd be doing
That's what we
as an
do.
F2.
That's what we
Exactly.
do. That's what we do.
So I think from that point of view, you're not stepping up, you're not stepping down, you're going across, which makes it a little bit easier.
It's translatable then, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
it is.
there's a word you said there that I caught onto, and that was adventure. So would you say it was an adventure being out there?
I think so. I mean, obviously, you guys already explained about your stories of like living abroad and, you know, studying abroad. And I think, I mean, for myself, I grew up in the UK, studied in the UK, did F1 and F2 in the UK. So I thought that if I wanted to live abroad, try something a bit new, this was a very good time to do it, because, you know, you can work doing the job that you're kind of okay at because you've done F1, F2, you're not terrified.
You're familiar.
You kind of know what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, you're young enough that, you know, your friends and family can stay here, but, you know, you haven't got like lots of dependence on you or things, bills to pay.
So I reckon many of our viewers have a question, which is, let's speak about work-life balance, comparing Australia to UK. working hours, leaves, whether it was sick leave, annual leave, study leave. Could you just tell us how different was it to you?
Sure. So most rotas you'll be working on, you're probably working about 76 hours a fortnight.
Okay.
You get about 5 weeks of annual leave a year.
Okay.
And then you get sick leave. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but that's accrued depending on how long you've worked. And then study leave, you also get, I think it's at least a couple of days, maybe a week, and you can use that to go to conferences or whatever you feel like. So it's probably a little bit better than here, I'd say in general. And then obviously life outside of work depends on what your interests are, but as a country, it's got so much going for it in terms of, like I said, I'm someone who really likes traveling, so seeing places that I've not seen before in the world. So you've got incredible landscapes, you're really into nature, you've got, the cultural side of things, so, you've got music, you've got sport, you've got great food.
You've got huge spiders.
You have huge spiders, you have big snakes, the things that people go and really want to see.
There's no place on earth that has it all.
It is.
There has to be a catch.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds like quite the adventure. You mentioned something about sick leave. Now, I know with the system in the UK, maybe it's just how we are as British people.
Yeah.
We tend to feel a certain kind of way about taking sick leave, don't we?
We do.
Maybe as doctors.
A bit guilty, don't you?
A bit guilty.
A bit guilty. I can't. So I've been to work many times, even though I'm not feeling the best.
We all have.
But I just go to work because if I wasn't at work today, then the whole of the job is going to just be dumped on the consultant.
Absolutely. And you just know that you're letting the team down. Maybe it's a bit of a British thing. Maybe it's a bit of a doctor thing. Maybe it's a bit of an NHS culture thing. We know we shouldn't, but we do. We'll push ourselves to go in.
Yeah, probably. I agree a bit
Absolutely.
of NHS culture.
Can you tell us what the Australian culture's like in that regard?
Yeah, so that was a huge difference in culture, I
Yeah.
think. Like you said, I've always grown that you go in to work unless you absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go in sick on the ward round just to make sure that there's not too many jobs, then you go home just because you're so unwell. Now, I think sick leave there is a lot, well, not just sick leave, just being sick is respected a lot more. If you're unwell for whatever reason and you need to call in sick, you have an allocated amount of sick leave that's entitled, which is not just a medicine thing, that's just a government, a nationwide thing, an Australian thing. And then workforce would be very good at covering shifts. So I would say, for example, I would call in sick or my colleague would call in sick. Workforce would contact the people who they could move around, and within an hour or two you would have at least an extra doctor, maybe 2 doctors. Things would always get covered, and you'd never really get that many shifts uncovered. I think they were a lot more proactive in making sure that the clinical demands were met, so they had the appropriate staffing, whether that meant escalating rates, pulling people from other shifts, to make sure that people didn't have to increase the workload. Whereas I think here it's about just work a little bit harder.
Wait, you just opened my eyes on something. You mentioned escalated rate. Does that mean that you have locuming in Australia?
So you do have locuming in Australia.
Is the locuming process very similar to NHS?
Yes and no, in a way. So obviously you've got locums within your own trusts, in your own hospital.
Of course.
If you want to pick up extra shifts, so what would happen, for example, my hospital is they'd always just send out an email pretty much every day of unfilled shifts. So if you wanted to pick up a shift, there would be the rates for SHO or registrar or whatever, and you could just pick up any shifts that you wanted. And that would just be like a daily email that everyone's getting, so everyone's aware of all the possible locums, so that everyone kind of knows how to pick up shifts. And then you've got the outside of your own trust locums. So when I was in Australia, I actually spent a bit of time as a full-time locum. So when I left my full-time job at my trust, I signed up to a locum agency. Basically worked as a locum employee, and that works kind of similar to the NHS. Maybe it's a little bit less common now, but it's kind of what it used to be like a couple of years ago, where you sign up to an agency and they will basically advertise shifts. They'll advertise hospitals. You send them your CV, and they basically find you work.
Well, compared to, I suppose, the job situation we're facing here, sounds like quite the dream situation, doesn't it? I can completely understand why.
I would understand why would people go
hordes
to
of
Australia.
F2s going to Australia.
So I've heard a rumor. Now, this should be very relevant to all the FY2s watching us. Going to Australia, as satisfying, as fulfilling, and as promising as it is, I've heard a rumor, I want to double check that that's true or not, which is it's extremely easy to get a non-training post, although it's practically next to impossible to get a training post. Is that right?
I wouldn't say it's next to impossible. I think it depends on what you want to do. So, for example, I know some friends who are currently in Australia training. Some of my friends are in BPT, or basic physician training,
Okay,
which is the
equivalent of
equivalent IMT, and I
Okay.
know some friends who are in emergency medicine training as well. I think it's a little bit more difficult to get into surgical training there, and I think it's a little bit more difficult to get into the critical care or acute specialty trainings there, because they're quite popular with the Australian graduates. And what they do in Australia is they prioritise their own graduates, and they prioritise their own state graduates.
Okay.
So it's quite difficult to outcompete these people.
These priorities.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's impossible, because, like I said, I know a few friends who are in training programs at the moment.
You make it sound so good. Are there any downsides?
So I think, like I said, I went to Australia about 2 years ago. So I think I've heard from first-hand accounts of some of my friends who've gone in the latter years, there are less jobs available than there were. I think
So
probably
the
because
whole crisis starts.
the whole crisis starts again.
I mean, it's, if you think about it, it's very similar to what's going on in the UK. It's because of this vast desire to come to UK. A lot of doctors applying worldwide. So now you have this bottleneck. When you were in Australia, that was when, 2 years ago?
2 years ago to now, yeah.
So imagine within these 2 years how many people have been applying to Australia and going and going and going, and the bottle effect started.
And it sounds like some of them aren't coming back.
It does not seem like they are.
Yeah.
So I have a very important question. Let's say I'm someone who just woke up today. I'm an FY2 and decided, okay, I'm gonna start working to go to Australia. What piece of advice can you tell me about starting looking for a job? In NHS, as we mentioned, it's a track website.
Yeah.
Do you have an Australian track website with a lot of spiders on it?
So things in Australia aren't quite as nationalised. They're more localised.
Right.
So things are done more by state, things are done more by local trusts in
By
hospitals.
the trust that you were describing.
Exactly.
Which is really similar to our system here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trusts.
So I think the best piece of advice is try and find somewhere you'd want to live in Australia.
Okay.
So, for example, any of the major cities, there's not that many. And then once you find the city that you think that kind of suits you for whatever reason, look at the different trusts and hospitals available in that city and start looking at their site to when their application process opens, what they want, and basically start going from there. And that's probably the best way to get a job.
That's so helpful.
So the short answer is do your research.
Do your research.
Do your research.
Get on with it.
Be keen,
Yeah.
and you'll get there.
Nice.
Well,
That's
there
very
we have
nice. There
it.
you have it. So to wrap things up, if you finish FY2, your options are non-training post, which is what I'm doing. Educational training post, which is what you've done.
And which are becoming harder to come across.
So are becoming
It's
harder
worth
to come across.
mentioning, yeah.
Or going to Australia, which is what you have done.
Or locuming.
Or
If
locuming,
you
which
can.
what you've done as well.
Or leaving medicine entirely, which we will be addressing
In the next
episode.
Yeah, that's gonna be very nice.
Interesting stuff to come.
It's true.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you
Yeah.
for joining
Absolutely.
us.
And we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.